Hey listeners, last year was our 15th year of the best in food storytelling. As we head into 2025, we're kicking off a contest in collaboration with the podcast series Feast and Harmony and Sixth Man, where you have the opportunity to win a 4-night cruise for 2 on Chefs Making Waves, a food, wine, and spirits festival at sea. When you donate to HRN, you'll be entered for the chance to win a porthole cabin for 2 on Chefs Making Waves, sailing May 5th through 9th, 2025, from Miami to Cozumel, Mexico on Norwegian Gem. You'll also support another year of great food storytelling with a portion of your donation going toward disaster relief for the food and beverage communities within Western North Carolina and Southern California. This cruise is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for culinary adventurers, featuring top celebrity chefs including Jonathan Waxman, Antonio LaFaso, Robert Irvine, and many, many more. There's a myriad of experiences such as restaurant takeovers, live food and mixology demos, themed parties, and more. To enter your chance to win, please visit heritageradionetwork.org/cruise. Terms and conditions apply. You must be 21 or over to enter. That's heritageradionetwork.org/cruise.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Hi, listeners. It's Taylor. You are about to hear a meaty episode from our team covering food insecurity. Our reporters have been working on these stories in this episode for months, never anticipating that they would launch at a moment like this. As we release this episode, news outlets are reporting that House GOP lawmakers are proposing over $200 billion in cuts to the Agriculture Committee's budget. These cuts include reductions to programs like SNAP, which provide essential support to millions of people facing food insecurity in the U.S., and it's a program you'll hear about today. Now more than ever, we hope that this episode highlights the ways that communities create avenues of care, even in the face of uncertain futures for government aid. And I hope that we can give you a starting place to plant some seeds of nutrition support in your own community.
Another way that we address food insecurity is we address the root causes of hunger, which we consider are poverty, systemic inequity, and structural racism. And so in addition to addressing the immediate need for food in our communities through our network pantries, we also recognize that there are communities that we serve that are disproportionately affected by hunger due to years of inequity and disinvestment.
Today on Meat and Three, we're exploring what it takes to secure the nutritional needs of our communities. These services are needed now more than ever as the rates of food insecurity increase drastically across the nation. And it feels harder to rely on our federal government for continued support, let alone affordable eggs. Whereas localized efforts can address the immediate needs of their communities by providing effective and multifaceted approaches to aid. Think the Black Panther Party and their People's Free Food Program. These revolutionary efforts of the Black Panthers in the late 60s to make sure that kids were able to eat a meal before school actually put pressure on legislators to incorporate free breakfast into their school budgets. At the top of the episode, you heard from Man Yi Lee, a spokesperson for the Greater Chicago Food Depository. This food bank distributes to over 800 pantries, shelters, and soup kitchens in the Greater Chicagoland area. So in honor of all of that important work, instead of a meat and 3 sides today, we're bringing you 3 hearty dishes, covering traditional and unique models that, combined, work to provide holistic care and socioeconomic mobility for our neighbors in need. I'm Taylor Early. This is Meat and 3 on HRN.
Meat and 3.
Meat and 3.
Meat and 3.
1 meat, 3 sides.
Food, news, and storytelling.
A square meal for your ears.
Meat and 3.
For our first dish, Ash Tyler takes us to programs across Chicago, from a local pantry to a neighborhood health service.
Food has always meant more to me than just nourishment. It's connection, joy, and culture, which makes it especially difficult to see so many in my community struggle with food access. According to the Greater Chicago Food Depository, 1 in 5 homes with kids have experienced food insecurity in Chicago. I've been trying to understand what kinds of programs exist around me to help those in need. And I'm going to introduce you to 3 different orgs with 3 different approaches. First up is Parker Callahan, Director of Operations at Ravenswood Community Services, a pantry on the north side, to break down how the traditional food pantry model works.
Our main mission is just to get food into the hands of people who need it. We have what is called a client choice pantry model, which means we put out different options for folks who are coming through the pantry line. We try to make it as close to a grocery store experience as we can.
Parker and his team distribute 12,000 pounds of food every week out of the function hall at All Saints Episcopal Church. On Friday, he'll place an order through the Greater Chicago Food Depository website, and then, around noon on Tuesday,
we get a delivery of our pallets of food. We have about 10 to 12 volunteers who come who help us bring that all inside. And that is our canned good items, our fresh produce, our pantry staples, frozen meat, milk, pretty much everything under the sun.
And those volunteers set everything up for distribution. And there's no elevator, so they're going up and downstairs to get all of that food inside.
So we have 2.5 employees.
The half is a part-time employee. They purposely rely on volunteers so they can focus their resources on getting people the food they need.
The beautiful thing about volunteers is that people are there because they're motivated to be there. The tricky thing is it's not their job. So if things come up and they can't make it, you just kind of have to maneuver and deal with that.
Fortunately, RCS has a dedicated weekly stream of volunteers who help everything run smoothly.
Around 4 o'clock, we have a whole army of volunteers come again to help set that stuff up. And we start our distribution, and we take in groups of 12 people at a time. They come through our pantry line. We're open from 5:30 until 7:30. And in that amount of time, we'll see 400 people.
It wasn't always so many people coming through the pantry. In the last few years, with the pandemic, the rising grocery costs, and the migrant crisis, the number of neighbors in need continues to grow. On top of groceries, RCS also prepares 350 hot-to-go meals and 400 sandwiches each week.
Even though I've been doing this for 11 years, is truly one of the greatest feats. Every time I see it, it blows me away.
RCS is just one of the more than 800 pantries, shelters, and soup kitchens that receives food from the Greater Chicago Food Depository, or GCFD.
We distributed 121.3 million pounds of food out to our partner pantries. In fiscal year 2024, government food that we got from the USDA accounted for around 24% of the food that we get. Food donations was around 34%. Then the rest of the 42% is the food that we purchased.
Manny Lee, who you heard from at the top of the episode, is a spokesperson for GCFD. And that 42% she mentioned accounts for over 50 million pounds of the annual food given away by the org. GCFD buys eggs, dairy, protein, and produce with money from grants, foundations, and monetary donations from individuals and corporate donors. But food donation still plays a big role with their Retail Food Rescue Program, which collects food from local grocery stores and redistributes it to pantries.
And it's perfectly good food. It's just food that has been mislabeled, or there was a surplus of food that was ordered.
In recent years, the program has rescued 70% more food from local retailers, meaning more meals on pantry shelves and less in the landfills. GCFD isn't the only organization using creative approaches to supporting food sovereignty. The Farm on Ogden is a health, food, and job facility created by the Chicago Botanic Garden and Lawndale Christian Health Center. They have a Veggie RX program, which gets fresh produce in the hands of community members with chronic health issues on Chicago's west side. A couple local health centers refer patients to the farm.
Their patients are at risk or have a diet-related illness such as diabetes or hypertension.
That was Katara James, the manager of Veggie RX.
We provide them with a fresh box of vegetables, so about 6 to 8 items each week. And then we also provide nutrition education. So that can be in the form of on-site nutrition demos or virtual nutrition demos.
These cooking classes demo recipes that use that week's produce selection. The point isn't necessarily to teach participants how to cook. It's more about learning how to incorporate ingredients they normally wouldn't use.
They're like, I don't like eggplant. And I'm like, have you tried eggplant? And they're like, no. So I'm like, just try it and then let me know what you think. So then they get to try a recipe of whatever it is that they say they don't like. And then it changes their mind. They're like, you know what? This really isn't bad.
And anyone can refer patients to VeggieRx. To eliminate barriers to access, the only requirement is that individuals be a patient at one of the health centers in the neighborhood. The 40-week program is completely free.
We're primarily funded by the USDA, our GusNIP grant. So that helps cover people who has Medicaid or active EBT card. We also have some private funding through the Builder Initiatives to cover people who don't have an active link card or Medicaid.
Since starting in 2016, the demand for the program has grown. Now they have about 3,000 participants, most of them over 45. And an extra benefit of the program is the sense of community it provides.
I've seen a lot of people meet friends throughout VeggieRx just from picking up their boxes. And it also shows participants they aren't the only ones that's going through whatever it is that they're going through.
As for the future of VeggieRx, Farm on Ogden is researching how it can scale its program so it can be replicated in other neighborhoods and cities. From pantries to produce boxes, Chicago has found ways new and old to support the growing need for food justice and sovereignty. I have no doubt that programs across the city will continue to cultivate networks of care that can sustain our neighbors well into the future.
We'll be right back with more Meat and Three after a brief break.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. There's a reason when you think of Wisconsin, you think cheese. Cheese is a huge part of Wisconsin's history and future. In Wisconsin, the state of cheese, the tradition of cheese-making excellence began 180 years ago, before Wisconsin was recognized as a state. Immigrants traveled to settle in this lush green hills of Wisconsin, bringing their cheese-making traditions with them. These storied skills, combined with the freshest milk available, created a cheese-making culture that is uniquely Wisconsin. Wisconsin's 1,200 cheesemakers, many of whom are third and fourth generation, continue to pass on old-world traditions while adopting modern innovations in cheese-making craftsmanship. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
Welcome back to Meat and Three. Food stamps have always come with a side of limitations: how much money is available, where they can be spent, and what they can be spent on. Folks on SNAP have to strategize how to effectively feed their family with these limited resources, which can often mean leaving the more expensive or even the higher quality foods out of the grocery baskets. Up next, Bean Metcalf explores the history of food stamps and how one particular organization in Oregon is increasing access to nutritious local food.
Back in 1939, during the final years of the Great Depression and the beginning of World War II, the U.S. started what would become the largest anti-hunger program in its history: food stamps. Food stamps originated as a business deal between farmers, government, and consumers, allowing participants to buy specific surplus commodities. With the severe economic downturn of the Great Depression, folks were too poor to buy the food that farmers had grown. Food was literally rotting in the fields while people starved on the streets. This new program allowed farmers to sell their produce and people to fill their bellies. The initial program only lasted a few years as the U.S. economy took a sharp turn upwards during World War II. But hunger continued to be an issue, and in 1961, food stamps came back. Since 2008, they've been relabeled as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. Today, there are around 41 million people who use SNAP. And while many assume this program is only for those in abject poverty, it's actually an invaluable resource for many Americans. The Government Accountability Office found that around 70% of folks receiving SNAP were employed full-time. In a country with stagnant wages and an increasing class divide, Services such as SNAP are crucial to keeping food on tables.
Yeah, it's such an interesting revolving door of people from all different walks and all different backgrounds and all different life circumstances that use SNAP. And I always try to tell people, like, this is a benefit program that you pay into with your taxes that is available for you when you need it.
That was Rachel Ward, the executive director of the Farmers Market Fund.
We are a nonprofit organization that's really focused on increasing access and affordability of fresh, locally grown fruits and veggies and foods in general. And our main way that we do that is through the Double Up Food Bucks program that matches SNAP benefits at farmers markets.
SNAP is so much more than just food assistance. It's also a way to keep money flowing through local economies and give people food freedom. In fact, in 2009, the Fair Food Network launched the Double Up Food Bucks program, allowing participants to literally double their SNAP benefits at local farmers markets. Since then, the program has taken root across the country, uniting farmers and consumers through local food.
What type of food do folks get access to when people view it as like a charity case, And why are we so eager to give our leftovers, our seconds, our not as good type stuff to folks just because they're in a rough situation? Everybody deserves to eat the food that they want to eat, that makes them feel good, that makes their family feel good, that's connected to their cultures and traditions.
Even though we all pay into these services, it can still be challenging to work past the shame that comes around accepting help. This can be particularly difficult in a culture that has often promoted shame around poverty, disability, or the inability to pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
It's not like you've got to extra earn it or deserve it. And it really disappoints me that there's been that language and stigma at the federal level, dating back to the Reagan era and what we talked about in terms of the welfare queen, which was a made up perception of someone who was taking advantage of the system that didn't even exist at that time, and that is just the image and the stigma that's stuck in people's heads.
As our world changes, so do the systems we build and the people that we serve. But one fact remains true. We all deserve access to fresh, healthy food.
There's a lot of worry and concern about the future. And I just think that programs like these are great catch-alls for when we have big governmental changes. The more that we can build community and support at the local level, the more resilient we're going to be to change, the more flexible we can be.
So far, we've talked about nonprofits, government programs, and other traditional institutions. But what about DIY mutual aid projects, where community members see a need and try to meet it themselves? For our last hearty dish, Sariyal Grullon digs into how the Laredo chapter of Food Not Bombs uses mutual aid to feed their local communities.
Laredo Food Not Bombs is a regional chapter of the Food Not Bombs initiative that has its 45th anniversary coming up this year. Being new to Laredo, I found out about Laredo Food Not Bombs while scrolling through social media. I was looking for a way to get involved with my new community and was curious about Laredo Food Not Bombs and its impact on this not-so-little border town in South Texas. Something about their approach just caught my eye.
In my opinion, these non-hierarchical mutual aid groups are what we need to make leaders out of individuals who might not have seen themselves as leaders in the first place.
Gabriel from Laredo Food Not Bombs explains a bit more about how this organization works.
So what we try to do is provide a nutritionally complete vegan meal to simply anyone who shows up and asks for one. We see a lot of migrants, and we especially just see a lot of folks living in the retirement communities who simply just don't have access. None of these individuals really have access to fresh food, as the area we serve in downtown Laredo is currently a food desert.
Laredo is a predominantly Hispanic border town, with 21% of its residents falling below the poverty line, almost double the average national poverty level of 11.5% as of 2022. Texas has the second highest rate of food insecurity in the nation, with 1 in 6 households experiencing hunger. With access to food becoming more difficult and homelessness on the rise, it makes sense why a community-forward initiative takes place in a space like this.
The goal ultimately is to just proliferate what mutual aid is here in Laredo and ideally see it catch on with other folks who want to make a change in their community, but honestly aren't sure what the best way forward is beyond just voting in an election, of course.
They try to fill in the gaps left by our government, but Laredo Food Not Bombs is just one piece of the puzzle.
The thing about Food Not Bombs is we're not trying to position ourselves as the sole resource for food insecurity. We are part of a wider, decentralized, worldwide network of organizations that collaborate but ultimately dictate their own needs, their own procedures, and so on.
Their efforts go beyond a warm bowl of charro beans. The group is responsive to the needs of the community, organizing clothing drives to give away warm gear in preparation of the winter freeze. They've also put on a benefit show to raise money and have donated funds to help Palestinians in Gaza. Gabriel reminds us that
you have the power in your own hands to make a change within your community. If you see something and you think, man, this just doesn't seem right, what you can do is just find like-minded folks who agree with you, who also think that this issue is an issue, and start working on a plan to figure out how you can address it, even in the limited capacity you have.
Even though I'm new to the area and being far from home is hard, Laredo Food Not Bombs reminds me that collectively, we have a lot of power within our own hands. And during these uncertain times, we're definitely going to need to tap into that.
Amen to that. Well, that's our show. Thanks for listening. Learn more about the guests and topics we touched on this week, as well as the ways in which you can help support the nutritional needs of your community by checking out our show notes. This episode of Meat and Three was reported by Ash Tyler, Bean Metcalf, and Sariel Grillon. Our lead producer on this episode was Ash Tyler, with support from Maya Okindo, Hugh Huen, Jesse Nicely, Kiki Canuto, and me, Taylor Early. Our executive producers are H. Conley and me, Taylor Early. Our audio engineer is Sam Girardi. Our theme song was composed by Breakmaster Cylinder. This program is supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. Meat and Three is powered by Simplecast. Meat and Three is a production of Heritage Radio Network, the world's pioneer food radio station. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org and follow us at heritage_radio and at meaty.gram. Don't forget to sign up for our new and improved HRN newsletter. The link is in our show notes. And please stay in touch. Whether you have a story idea or would just like to say hey, write us at ideas@meatand3.nyc, and that's all spelled out.